think that what it gave me was the sense of strength and the sense of, when things really go down, it can only go back up. And once you swam in the ocean, you're not scared of lakes anymore.
This is the first time that I'm telling this story.
Hello there, and welcome to Whips and Chains.
An individual can be sold innumerable times.
What are the whips that we flog ourselves with often?
I discovered cancer. I had breast cancer.
And what are the chains that bind us down?
फिर मैंने YouTube पे देखा कि फीमेल फिटिसाइड होता कैसे है.
Is something I want to explore in my show.
They're orphans.
It's okay. It's okay.
गर्दन निकलती है, बाकी हिस्सा ऐसे ऐसे करके निकलता है. यार इतना बड़ा पाप होता अपने गांव में.
It's horrific.
Somebody passed me by and hit my bum.
He did have a personality disorder.
कई बार मैं सो ही नहीं सका.
All the traffickers that I've seen, they are common people like you and me.
She said, "Kanda tu dein, vada putar tu."
If you talk about human trafficking, it's a $1 billion business.
There was a lot of violence, a lot of aggression.
बड़े बड़े पुल बना दोगे, उनसे ह्यूमैनिटी तो नहीं बनने वाली.
And welcome to Whips and Chains. Hello there, and welcome again to Whips and Chains, the show where we have thought-provoking discussions about unusual topics. My guest today is someone who calls himself the founding intern of his creative marketing agency. He's quite the maverick. He's bold, he's quirky, and he calls his life a series of unfortunate events which he has overcome. So with that said, Bo, I'm very, very delighted to have you here on my show.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to a very interesting conversation about how it is your life unfolded.
A series of unfortunately fortunate events.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because that's how I at least look at it. It's
Yeah.
not just unfortunate. I mean, yeah, sure, unfortunate, but also I've been fairly fortunate enough as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
why not talk
And
about those?
you worked for that fortune also, right?
To a large extent, yeah.
So let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Tell me about your childhood, where you grew up, and
Okay.
let's start at the beginning of the story.
Okay. I grew up in Calcutta. I spent most of my childhood there. I only moved to Delhi in 2007. But childhood was, it was a mixed bag. And like most, I think, children in India, I had a somewhat of a disturbing environment that I grew up in.
In terms of?
In terms of just, dad was an alcoholic. He battled with it a lot. And I grew up watching that. So, and then, with alcoholism comes a host of other things as well. Short temper, violence, and just lack of controlling money and all of those things that come with any addiction, I feel, right?
Right.
So you grew up in an environment where you're witnessing a lot of these things, right? And so the reason I call it a series of unfortunately fortunate events is because with every unfortunate event, you're also learning something, right? Whether you like it or not, you're also learning something. So I mean, when I grew up, I learned how to handle my addictions. I mean, I'm addicted to cigarettes. I smoke. But alcohol, not so much, because I know how to control it. I love alcohol. I'm especially fond of gin, but you're never going to see me tipsy. The reason you're never going to see me tipsy is because something has gone off in my mind, something which I can't control, right? And even though sometimes I want to let it all go and just have fun, I can't. There's a mind block,
Right.
So I think psychology plays such a funny role in people's lives in shaping who they become in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up seeing a lot of violence, and I think because of that, I became a person who was not violent at all. Right. I honestly can't remember a single time when I've been physically violent with anyone. my defense strategy has always been humor. So at any given point in time, if there's a
Battle or a
yeah,
disagreement,
tussle
yeah.
or a disagreement,
Right.
I'm always going to try and break that
Huh.
with something funny, which may not be the right thing to do at that point in time, but for that split second, it just
It
breaks
comes
the
to you,
tension.
yeah.
It
And
breaks the
com-
tension,
yeah,
right? And then, I mean, humor also has its repercussions.
Right.
So the person who's angry at you might possibly get angry here, but that'll take a bit of time.
Right,
You know?
right,
So,
right.
yeah, coming back to my childhood, childhood was, it was a mixed bag. On one side, I was growing up looking at all of that in the house. But on the other side, I was learning so much. I learned my love for writing came from my dad. My love for just building businesses, entrepreneurship, putting myself out there came from my mother.
What did she
she's-
do?
So for the longest time, she was at home. She was a stay-at-home mom. And then my dad and my mom started a business together in public relations. And I would see her draping herself in these gorgeous saris, going out there, holding meetings, meeting all sorts of people, and it was lovely to see her, and especially
Taking charge, yeah.
taking charge, right? And especially after my dad passed away, she really stepped up. Also, I think no one really had the choice of not stepping up, you know?
Yeah.
But she really took charge, and the business that my mom and my dad started, she carried on with that business. And, I mean, the business was growing. It was really nice. And she was always so congenial with people. She was never afraid of saying hi to people. She still isn't, which is a fear a lot of us have.
Yeah.
How do you how do you go
Especially
to
when you're a homemaker and you're
Correct.
coming out of that space.
yeah, and to
into-
transform
yeah.
yourself from what
Right.
she was to
Right.
what she became was a huge leap. It was a huge leap, right? So I learned entrepreneurship, and I learned how to be with people and just to be open about oneself from her, unapologetically open.
But you know your father also died tragically.
Yeah.
And you had to sort of get the whole act together, and suddenly you felt that it all fell on your shoulders, the
Well,
responsibility.
yes and no, because see, I mean, to be fair, I mean, my dad died when I was 19. I was in my first year of college, and he actually killed himself, and I saw that happen. But it wasn't all on me to support the family, because my mom was doing that, right? But as I said, the brain plays tricks
Yeah.
on you, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, I had to step up just like my mom did. And even though the money that I was bringing into the house may have been
Negligible.
negligible, marginal, right? But still,
You felt the pressure.
there was pressure felt, and also it wasn't just from a monetary perspective. It was also from, now you got to do something with your life, and that pressure of doing something with your life was again both unfortunate and fortunate as well. Unfortunate because I'm in college. When you're in college, most of my college mates were doing drugs, getting late, missing classes, all of that, the stuff that usually happens in college. I didn't have any of that. I couldn't have any of that. So when my friends were out partying, or they were getting together at people's places, I had 3 jobs that I was working at. So I would wake up at about maybe 5:36, go to one job, do a morning shift there, then go to college, do my morning classes there, then go back to that same workplace, and then from there come back home. And then I was also working at the Times of India then, so I would at the page 3 circuit, so which meant that I would have to cover clubs
And night.
and night. So the cab would come pick me up with the photographer at about maybe 11 o'clock or so at night, and we'd be out till about 3 o'clock in the morning. I would come back
Wow.
home, barely get about 3.5 hours of sleep before it started over and over and over again. So yeah.
But that sort of that sense of, so much pressure and so much performance that you had to do at such a young age.
Yeah.
What did it bring out in you? What emerged?
I think, this is, of course, this is all in retrospect, right?
Yeah.
But I think that what it gave me was the sense of strength and the sense of, when things really go down, it can only go back up.
Right.
And once you swam in the ocean, you're not scared of lakes anymore.
Yeah.
You're not scared of a piddly pond anymore. So I think that's what it taught me. The fact that I was out there, really out there in the jungle, right? And when I lived that life, now when I look back and I see that the other stuff that I've gone through in my life, it was easier for me to handle those situations.
Right.
And if I didn't live that life, I would have been,
Yeah.
are expletives allowed in this
Yes,
session?
yeah.
I would have been fucked.
Yeah.
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 So, that's what it taught me. So
Yeah.
I'm both deeply regretful of the fact that I went through that, but I'm also very, very grateful as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be who I am today.
That's true.
So
So it gives you a kind of self-confidence that you've been through a fire.
Yeah.
And so everything else is like a minor spark here and there.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
self-confidence is a great way to put it, honestly, because for the longest time in my childhood, I was not confident at all. In fact, so I was one of the people who was bullied in school because of, children are cruel.
Cruel.
Yeah. So from my years to, they would call me chashmish or some
Yeah,
shit. Yeah.
yeah.
So all of that. And plus I was really scrawny.
Okay.
And all of that was happening at my junior level. And then towards senior school, after college, I started becoming a completely different person in terms of just how secure I was with who I was and how confident I was.
Yeah.
Again, with who I was.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't. Most people who are bullied become bullies, right? I never became that. But instead, I became very, very confident just being who I was. And yeah.
And then what happened? What happened in the work scenario? What kind of, job did you choose? And how did that transition into the ad world and the creative world happen?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, so I mentioned that my dad was in public
Yeah.
relations. At that time, in the 1980s, public relations and advertising were very closely related.
Related.
Right?
yes.
Not so much right now, but back in the day it was. To an extent where I would see my dad, who was in PR, brainstorming with someone who was in the creative field or client servicing, right? And they would talk about the business problem and how to approach the solution and all of that. So I was about 7, 8 years old, and I would see all of this exciting stuff happen on the dining
table.
Yeah, and my dad had this friend called Ashok. Very interesting character. He had white hair. He couldn't have been more than mid 30s, maybe early 30s at that point in time.
Really with white hair.
Yeah, and he used to smoke cigars and he used to travel abroad. And he would come back whenever he would travel abroad. He would come back and he would get me small cans of Coke. Now, Coke wasn't in the country
yeah.
then. So for a 8-year-old child
Big deal.
to see
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
absolutely.
iconic, right?
Yeah, right.
And he would smoke cigars and say, fuck this, fuck that, fuck the universe, this. And I was like, wow, who is this person? I want to be him. And I had no idea what he did for a living.
Right.
I just knew I wanted to be him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I ended up going to his office, the place where he worked at. And I realized what an advertising agency was. And I saw
Right.
the eclectic, in the 80s,
Yeah.
advertising was still a
So,
very
yeah, new-
eclectic
yeah.
place, right?
Alternative.
Yeah,
Completely.
and and people were dressed in jeans and t-shirts and
Casual.
and smoking inside the office and talking about lines and looking
right.
at artworks. And I was like, wow, this is nuts.
Really
I
cool,
want to
yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
So at the back of my head, I knew inherently what I wanted to do, but also I wasn't really good at anything else, to be fair, right? I wanted, there were about 2-3 options open to me. There was law that I really wanted to do. There was advertising, which I knew nothing about, but
You felt you had the
it was
affinity.
impressionable, right?
Yeah.
So it was an impression that was created. And there was journalism, these 3 things. And all of these 3 things, are related to words, which is the only thing I knew. I didn't know anything else,
Yeah.
right? So I gave up on science, I gave up on maths, and I didn't know anything about politics. I still don't. So I had to figure out my career between these three things. So my first career choice was not advertising at all. It was law.
Yeah.
And I remember once class 12 finished, I told my dad, listen, I want to go to, I think, Christ University in Bangalore, because they had a law.
Right.
I think it's a law college, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it had a law, whatever, course. And I said, this is how much it's going to cost. I want to go there. He said, no, we don't have the money. And so that there died my
Ambition.
career. Career in law. I think I would have made a great lawyer. I think, I'm not sure. I could have been terrible at it. But so anyway, so law went flying out the window. But then once college started, I started doing internships and traineeships. The way I got my first job is very interesting. I didn't know anyone in advertising. I knew of certain people, but I didn't know anyone personally. There was this one gentleman that I knew of. His name was Anurag Hira at Bates. And someone had said, he's great in Calcutta. He's still amazing. Such a lovely human being. And he was supremely talented. So someone said, you should go meet him. So I went. I went to the Bates office and I sat in the reception early in the morning at about 8:30. So the receptionist said, who would you like to meet? I said, I would like to meet Mr. Anurag Hira. So she said, you'll have to wait. He hasn't come into offices yet. So he walks in
Yeah.
and the receptionist says, there's this guy who wants to meet you. So he turns around, he looks at me, and I was like, hi, I don't know who you are, but I've been asked to meet you, and I'd like to join as a trainee. So he says, we're not looking for trainees right now. I said, okay, fair enough. I'm going to come back again tomorrow. So I did that. I came back to that same office every single day for about a week, 10 days. And he would come, look at me. I would ask the same question. He would say, we're not looking for trainees. I think on the 10th day, he got fed up. And he said, just come. And that's how I got my first gig at an agency. So that happened. And then by that time, I was getting into advertising. I was developing a love for it. I loved writing. And
you did really well because you were the youngest creative director ever, right? I mean,
the youngest. I think Rahul Bose was the youngest. I wasn't the youngest, but I was voted at of the top 30 young creative directors of India. Yeah.
Wow.
At a point in time, I did well. So I came back. Not came back. I came to Delhi, and my career just took off. Yeah. I worked with. Also took off because the people that I was surrounded with, the sheer talent of people that I was surrounded with was
really,
so good.
yeah.
All my training happened at places like Ogilvy, Rediff, under a lot of fantastic people, Wyden Kennedy. So I learnt a lot from these people, a lot.
Yeah.
And I owe my entire career to these people. I wouldn't be where I am, still loving what I do, if it was not for the training that I had. And I think, just digressing a little bit here, the people who are writers, who call themselves writers today, on LinkedIn, you'll often find them saying that, a writer that can deliver 5x returns for your brand. I think that's bullshit, right? There's nothing to back that up with. Also, these people have had zero training.
Yes.
They don't know their ass from their tail. It's true, they don't, right? But you got to do what you got to do to survive. And I respect that.
Yeah.
Had I not had any training, I possibly would have done the same thing.
Right.
Fake it till you make it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so when you've reached such heights and you're doing so well and you've got it together, you're passionate about your work and all of that, life had another challenge for you because in your personal life, your marriage didn't really work out. So tell me a little bit about that.
So I met my then, my ex-wife at the place I was working at. And she was a lovely person. She still is a lovely person. But I think that I was too young for marriage. I don't think men should be married below 30. I don't think they're mature, right? But also we were not a great fit. And these are concepts that you understand slightly later on in life. I don't think these are concepts that you understand at that kind of age. I got married when I was about, I think, 26, stepping on to 27. So I was very young.
I got married at 21.
21?
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Wow. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, but
That's-
your marriage is going great.
Yeah.
I mean, mine
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah. No,
So-
so when you say that, I definitely agree with the fact that men mature later.
Yeah.
But was it also the marriage because there was this pressure from your mom that settle down and all
No,
of that?
no, no.
Was
There
it
was
that story?
no, not at all. There was
Okay.
no pressure from my mom at all. There was a certain bit of pressure from her parents, which is understandable. I mean, I
Yes.
understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, I can put this on so many people.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it was me and her who took this call. No one put a
Right.
gun to her head.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And we thought it was going to work. And I've always been an eternally optimistic person, which is both a flaw and a boon. I think everything's going to work out, right? And I enter into any relationship or any sort of commitment with that mindset in mind. I think, yeah, let's do it. We'll see. You know, I'm not so sure that's the right way to go about certain things. I now, for example, I'm slightly more clinical. I weigh the pros and cons of certain situations before I get into them, right? But again, coming back, that's a lot to do with maturity. That's a lot to do with growing up and seeing the world and see how you fit into certain situations.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's
Um,
true. But it's, what you're talking about is also the kind of insight that comes with self-reflection. Because most people are very easy to play the blame game, right? When shit happens and things go wrong, it's always, it was this one's fault and that one's fault. And, so, there is such a thing as an amicable divorce and an
Yeah.
amicable parting. And
Yeah.
you have had that.
Yeah.
So, talk about how that works, because given that, you're a father of a daughter
Yeah.
and, your daughter's doing well, with both of you, talk about that a little bit of how it's been, that whole journey.
So it's not been a bed of roses. So yes, it's been an amicable divorce, but I mean, I called for that divorce. I mean, I made up my mind that I wasn't going to stay in that marriage because I saw old patterns emerging once again, the patterns I saw in my childhood, right? And because of a variety of elements in that marriage, I could sense that there would be things that my daughter, that our daughter would grow up seeing, which I couldn't have at all, right? Under no circumstances. I couldn't even risk going deeper into the marriage, knowing that there was even a 1% chance that our daughter would grow up seeing her parents fight and wishing they were not married. That's not the right way to grow up. So, while that decision was easy, the decision of moving out of the house was not easy at all, because I love my daughter to death. She's the first priority in my life always. To leave the person that you're in love with, that you can die for, in order to protect her, is very hard. Very, very hard. So I remember when I moved out of the house,
How old was she at the time?
she was about, my memory sucks, but I think about 5 or 6.
So, I mean, she had a very close bond with you by
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time.
absolutely. I mean, we've
Yeah, yeah.
had a very, very tight, and our bond is not so much of a father-daughter bond. It's hard to explain. She is her own person. I am
Right.
my own person, and we've learned to respect who we are. We are friends. We are BFFs, right? But I don't think there's any remote.
Parental.
Yeah, it's not like I am your father, hence, and neither is it from her side as well, which is why we're very,
Yeah.
very good with each other,
Yeah.
right?
So, and she also gets on. I mean, you married again subsequently.
Yeah.
and-
So she gets along with my current wife
Yeah.
fabulously, and I think the reason why they can do that is because there is no compulsion. So, for example, before I even married again, I spoke to my daughter. I said, "Listen, I'm dating someone. Would you be okay if I married? First of all, because if you say no, then no, right? And she was very open to that idea, right?
Wow.
And we met. All of us met. I just wanted to test waters to see
chemistry,
how they were,
Right.
And it was fabulous. And the reason it was fabulous is because my wife as well. She had no thing about, oh, I'm going to be a stepmom. No. You are your own person. My daughter is her own person. I am my own person. So when we hang out, we're like three people hanging
independent,
out.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is why our hangout sessions are so much fun, because my daughter is, brings something to the table. I bring something to the table. My wife brings something to the table, right?
Right.
And we're like adults hanging out. It's not a triage
Yeah.
of connections. You know how these relationships
the relationship,
work. It's not dependent on
who is
hence
who
I'm married and
hence
hence you must do
are.
this, and
Right,
it's not
right.
that. It's you break, the word here, chains. You break the chains, and
there are no whips you're flogging each other with.
And you exist so much better. You
Yeah.
coexist so much better.
Right.
So
right.
it's fabulous right now, honestly.
And she is now about 12, I
Yeah,
think, right?
she's turning
so
12.
that's also a great age, because they are at that brink of, between a child and a teen. So it's really the best part.
Well,
because,
she hasn't been a child for a long time. The reason she hasn't been a child for a long time is because, I think kids are maturing far quicker
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
But also, she's had a tough life
Right.
growing up, right?
Right.
She hasn't had a very, I'm going to put this in quotes, normal, because I think the word normal itself is such a weird word,
Right.
Right. So she's had her share of problems and stuff which might affect her psychologically when she grows up. So she had to like I had to grow up quicker. She had to grow up quicker. The conversations that she and me have are very adult conversations. They're not father-daughter conversations.
So you mean she can ask you about anything under the sun.
Oh, absolutely.
So she would be able to have a conversation with you about sex, for example.
Not right now, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, or periods or menstruation or boys or crushing on where all
Yeah,
that is.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
so we went for a staycation, I think a couple of weeks back, and so I was packing the sanitary napkins, and I said, how many do we pack? So these are
normal.
These
Yeah.
are very normal
These are
questions,
normal.
and they have to be normal, right? You can't be, oh, periods, like
Yeah.
you can't. You
Yeah.
can't.
Right. Right.
That's so uncool.
Yeah.
I mean, why?
Yeah.
It's so normal, right?
Yeah.
So we have, I mean, she comes and tells me, oh, I like this boy. And I said, okay, cool.
Yeah.
What's his name? Tell me about him and all that. And then a couple of weeks later,
She'll
the
say
boy's
it's done.
changed, So it's funny. And then I tell her, oh, but I liked this girl when I was 16 and she was my first crush. And I tell her about my life growing up
Right,
and
right.
all that, and we exchange stories, and it's interesting to see these relationships developing at her level. And for her, it's interesting to see my relationships from my level when
Yeah.
I was growing up and I was her age.
Absolutely.
So these are really fun conversations.
No, but just the fact that you can have those conversations so openly, I think reduces that, that trauma that children
agree.
Go
Yeah.
through. And then even, when they grow up, they don't have to wait till they're 30 and lying on a therapist's couch to say, this happened and I.
Yeah.
Because that's such a waste of a relationship and a life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even when my ex-wife and me split up, both of us had conversations with her,
Yeah.
saying that just because we got married doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stay married. What doesn't change is the fact that we love you, right? That doesn't change,
Yeah.
but nothing else.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't have to bind,
Correct, correct.
yourself with
Absolutely.
with something that's not working out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and this is what I tell her, right? I mean, I've written so many letters to her. And one such letter says that when you grow up, you're going to be in relationships.
Yeah,
Don't ever feel pressurized to stay in that relationship, even though you're hurting or you're in pain. it's okay to move on. Sure, that's painful as well, but it's perfectly fine to move on. You know,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
needs to be an option that should always be given to kids
but
and parents.
but I think, you know, that is where I think we have also evolved from a time and age, like purane zamane mein, whether it was a job or a marriage, it was for life.
Correct.
You know, even careers.
Correct.
And you know, professions. I mean, you saw your father and people, you know, for 30 years they stuck to jobs at very toxic situations, very toxic sort of environments, and they dealt with a lot of things that we would think are unimaginable now. You know,
Yeah.
we would like
Yeah.
call it out, right? So
Yeah.
whether it was the office or the home. And your story seems to be one where if something was not working, you have changed it, you have, you know, flipped, pivoted the whole thing and moved from there.
Yeah.
So coming back to the next challenge that you had professionally, what was it? Or personally, what was it?
So career-wise, as I said, I was doing very well.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all stars and moons and, you know, astrology.
Yeah.
I think I was also working very hard for
Very
it.
hard, yeah.
Yeah. I was fairly good at what I was doing. I'm never going to say I was better than anyone else because I'm not. I think I'm very average, but I work very hard. So
And you're not like competitive, you're not trying to bring down or pull down someone else to be who you are.
No,
all
never,
of
never.
that.
Never.
Because all that kind of politics
Yeah,
does
yeah.
really happen in agencies and all that, no?
It does and it doesn't.
Depending on who you are.
Yeah, depending on who you are, what you attract, what kind of people you surround yourself with. So I would always do a lot of research before I entered an agency. I didn't want to enter a place which was known for being a slightly toxic environment. And I worked with very good people.
Yeah.
The people I worked with were not political at all. They just were hungry for good work. So I've been very fortunate. So my career was going very well. 2018 is when this whole MeToo movement was going on, right? And there was an allegation against me, some fake allegation against me on Medium. Someone had written something and it was anonymous. And then my boss at this company that I was working in met me and said that, you know, you have to, and this was at a time when my bosses also were named by employees and stuff. And anyway, so this other boss of mine, the CEO, spoke to me and said that, you know, we have to let you go. I said, okay, why? Said, no, business loss, this, that. I said, but business loss to hota hai. I mean, what's the big deal?
Right.
So I said, no, but this is impacting business clients. And I know that because I, along with another person, had started the agency in Gurgaon, right? So I know that clients were going and the business was iffy.
Right.
And the first people who are thrown out in a situation like this are the senior people because
Right.
that they draw
Right.
the biggest money. Anyway, long story short, I resigned. So anyway, so he said that if you resign, then you'll get 2 months salary. If you don't resign, you'll get 1 month salary. Something like
So
that.
it's
I
made
can't remember. It
sense,
was a long time back. So I resigned. But the shitty thing that the agency did was, I think 2 hours after I resigned, they took out a tweet saying that as a company, we are against sexual harassment at the workplace or whatever like that. And these people have been let go. And with these people, my name was also there, which meant that
Yeah.
I was sacked, which I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't sacked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't fired.
They
to
were
fire
trying to-
me,
yeah.
no, but it gets interesting because to fire me, you would have had to hold an investigation. You can't
Right.
fire someone without having an investigation.
Right.
Right? There was no investigation. The reason why there was an investigation was because there was no accuser. It was all anonymous. Right? And anyway, so that once that tweet went out, my life was fucked. My career was fucked. No, I was unhireable. No one was going to touch me. And no matter what I said, and I was in a state of panic, right? I was trying to salvage the situation as best as I could. And everyone had different opinions about it, right? Someone told me, oh, you owe people an apology. So I wrote out an apology without knowing what the hell I was writing.
Apologizing
Yeah.
for, yeah.
Someone said you must exit social media. So I exited social media. Someone else said, um, you must start afresh. Start afresh how? It's so easy to say, but how the hell do you start
Yeah,
afresh?
yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I was listening to all of these people, and I didn't end up listening to myself. I spoke to lawyers. Um, I had a recourse of action, but I just didn't have the strength. I didn't have the strength. I was too busy just trying
Grappling
to just
with,
like
yeah,
I was just
taking
trying to
o-
keep my head
yeah.
above water, because what I was going through at that point in time was horrendous, to a point where I very meticulously planned out my suicide, very meticulously, and it wasn't like an
Jesus.
emotional thing at all. It was a very simple mathematical equation. I knew I couldn't earn any money. I knew if I died, my daughter at least would make some money from my life insurance. It was as simple as that.
Yeah.
So, but then I went to Cal. I went to Calcutta to spend some time with my mom, and then on the flight back, I drew out a plan, and I thought to myself, look, you started with nothing, and sure, you've reached a certain place now, but just imagine you're starting with nothing again. Only this time, there are tags associated with me.
Yeah.
Untrue tags,
Yeah.
but there are tags
Mm,
nevertheless,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Who's to say it's true or untrue?
That's
If you
true.
read the tweet, you'll say, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
Because whatever's out there on social media or on the news, oh, it must
Seems
be true.
to be true, yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Now, the biggest mistake that I did is not talk about it back then. That's the biggest mistake, which I am now rectifying. Now I'm sending
Talking
legal
about it.
notices to everyone, right? But back then I didn't have the strength. I just didn't have the strength. Anyway, so yeah, so 2018 August has happened. 2019, I was just trying to see where I would make money from. So, and I mean, I said, okay, no jobs, no advertising career. Fair enough. What do I need? I need money, right? How much money do I need? I said, okay, if I sell off my car, if I move to a PG, I need about 80,000 bucks to survive. My daughter's school fees, clothes, this, that, whatever, my food, this, that. I'll need about 80,000 bucks. I went to the Uber platform. I saw how much money an Uber driver makes, and I saw that, okay, I would potentially make about 50,000 bucks, right? If I had my own car, or whatever, about make about 50,000 bucks. 30,000 would come in through some freelance or the other. So I knew, okay, I could
Manage.
make 80,000. Once you know that, if nothing else,
This is it, yeah.
you have this as a safety net, right? Once I knew that, then I went all out.
Yeah.
I spoke to people. I went out again. I went to clients and I said, this is my portfolio, this is what I do, this is what you'll read about me, this is what's actually happened. If you choose to work with me, great. If not, I understand. I get it. I get it. And I did get it. I wasn't just saying that.
Yeah,
I did get it.
yeah.
I understand that people are
Hesitant.
they believe everything they'll read. So I understood that, right? Had I been in their position, I possibly would have acted the same way they acted, So sure enough, so I understood that out of 10 people, maybe about 3-4 would work with me, 6-7 wouldn't, and that's exactly what happened. But what also happened was that the 3 people who worked with me, the work that I did with them was
so good.
was good, right? And then through those 3, 2
More.
more came, and then
It
work
just-
started
yeah,
coming
yeah,
in again.
yeah.
By the end of 2019, and I'm not saying this to show off at all, I'm just putting things into perspective. My last drawing salary at the place I was working at was 32.5 lakhs or 33.5, I'm not sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever, right? By mid 2019, I was making about close to 30
Wow.
in a year. Okay. 2019 August, I said, I'm just going to set up my own agency now. Work was coming in. but I needed to. It was coming in as a freelance thing here and there. I just needed to organize the situation a little bit. So I thought, let me give my company an identity. So I locked myself up in a hotel room. And I approached it like I would approach the strategy of any new client. I said, okay, what's the market gap? Where do I fit in? What do I bring to the table that
Others
others can't or aren't, right? And I found a spot. I found a nice little spot where what I had in mind could fit in, with a very different agency structure as well. I never wanted to build an
A big
agency for the sake of making an agency and hiring 20 people and doing that kind of work. I've done that. I didn't want to do that. So anyway, so locked up in a hotel room, I surrounded by sheets of white paper and color pencils and pens and all that. I started sketching and started writing down the vision for the company, how I was going to bring it out alive. And I called it the Voice Company.
Yes.
Now, there are two reasons why I call it the Voice Company. The first reason is the market reason, which is the fact that I think most brands need a voice, right? To do well, you need to find
Yeah.
your own voice.
Right.
But the other reason why I called it the Voice Company was a very personal reason. It was the fact that everyone needs to have a voice, and I understood how important having a voice is
Because
after this
you-
episode of mine,
yes.
because I didn't have the strength to say
Say
anything.
anything.
Just imagine if I had the strength to come out and talk about what actually went down. And you don't even know, I'm not going to talk about the other stuff, but a lot of stuff went down. But if I had the voice to tell my story, things could have been a lot different,
Yeah.
right?
So it's taken a lot of being very vulnerable, being very beaten, defeated, frightened, scared of what the world will say, and then somehow processing all of that in a way that enabled you to draw strength from past experience,
Yeah.
bring that into the mix.
Yeah, but I've never been.
And-
I've never been scared of what the world is going to say ever.
No.
That never was a feature in my head at all.
So it's just that you didn't have the strength. You were
I
you
didn't
were
have the
just
strength.
tired.
Yeah,
You were
I
just
didn't have the
tired.
strength. Yeah, when everything's sucked out of your body, you don't have the strength to get up from bed. I've spent months howling, lying in bed, where you feel incapacitated. You cannot move, and I remember that feeling so well, where I couldn't get up from bed to go eat. You know, I would just lie in bed thinking, "Fuck, what do I do now?"
And tell me, I mean, to ask a personal question, given that you had this whole addiction background in your family,
Yeah.
when things were really low, you never got drawn into, okay, now I'm going to just become an alcoholic, or I'm just
No.
going to, all of that did
No,
not.
it's not. Again, see, it's not in my control. Is what I think. So even on days when, you know, I used to drink every day, but I'll have like, I don't drink to get high. I drink to take the edge off the day. So I'll sit and curl up with one gin, or one small bourbon or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'll savor that drink. I drink for the flavor. I drink for the experience of taking the edge off. I don't drink to,
Get
I need to get
totally
smashed tonight.
smashed.
Yeah, I don't, and I hate that feeling also. You know, also age, like you feel like
Right.
shit the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but even then, I would drink, but it would never be beyond a certain point. Like I would have 2-3 drinks or whatever, but not to numb myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no numbing that pain. There was no numbing that pain. That pain was, oh my God, that was
Yeah.
hard. That pain was hard. There was no numbing it. There was nothing I could have done to numb it. So the only thing I could do was live it. You had to live that pain in order to come out of it.
So, what were the tools that helped you survive? I mean, were there friends? Was there work? Was there spirituality? What did you turn to kind of give you that anchor through all of it?
Honestly, it was myself, and I know I know what I'm sounding like when I say this. I don't believe in God. I am spiritual, but not to an extent that I think that there is a power over us, and I that's not who I am. I think the universe, whether you call it spirituality, whether you call it whatever, it's all here. Either you can harness it, right, or you can ignore it. And it's always been me. There has been nobody else. Of course, there are supports, right? There are support systems in place. You have a friend circle. But at that point in time, all my friends fucked off. There was no one there, right? My
Right.
closest friends fucked off. So,
And you don't blame them as such. For
of course, I blame them.
You do.
Yeah,
You
for
do-
sure.
You do.
But
have-
I blame them, but I don't hold anything against them. Like,
yeah.
a lot of friends have tried to keep in touch with me after I've resurfaced.
Your success.
Yeah, and I was like, fuck off.
Huh.
It doesn't work like that.
Right.
But it's been me. So whether I choose to look back on my experiences as a child or my growing up years, and I see that yes, tough situations are going to happen, right? And I'm just 40. I'm sure I'll fail. I'll fail. I'll have tougher situations by the time I
Right,
turn 50,
right.
60, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
there'll be more. There'll be many more.
Right.
But what other option do you have instead of facing them? I don't think you have any other option.
But tell me, you've developed this very quirky kind of persona. You stand out in, how you dress, how you appear with this, this whole image with pizza on your socks and, all this yellow frames and all of that. So how does this image play a role in who you are, building yourself?
The image is just for me. I
What-
like fun things. I like a certain sense of quirk. I like fun. There's so many conversations with my daughter that I screenshot because I'm like, she's such an interesting person and she's has such a delightful sense of humor. I've often told her that if you didn't have a sense of humor, I don't think we'd be getting along.
So, give me an
but-
example.
I think fun is an essence. Like the other day, I was on Amazon and I bought myself fake cockroaches. And I spent an entire couple of days just throwing them at people.
Okay.
My help. So she would be in the kitchen, I would throw a fake cockroach at her. And then she spent the next 5 minutes just running.
Screaming, huh?
Yeah, and then I would throw more at her. Then I also bought lizards. So I'm
This crazy person.
no. I just think I've somehow managed to keep the child in me also alive, and I think I'm glad I did because it's allowed me to be vulnerable as a child. It's allowed me to be curious about the world as a child. It's also allowed me to constantly be on learning mode. Like you mentioned,
Yes.
intern,
Yeah.
right? So that's the reason I call myself. So on my visiting card says founder and intern of the voice
Intern,
company.
yeah.
And a lot of people ask me, what do you mean intern? And I say that, intern
Yeah.
is not a designation for me. It's a way of life,
Yeah.
right? You need to be constantly open to learning about new things. Right now, I'm fascinated by AI. I'm fascinated, right? This is something I know nothing about. But I look at what you can do with it. And I spent about half an hour in the morning today creating a reel for the copy traineeship that I run. And it was nuts. I mean, I put a AI generated image. Using another AI platform, I turned that image into my mouth moving. Using another AI generated platform, I turned text into speech so that the mouth is saying
those
something.
things.
Then I made it a female voice. So now you have a reel of me with my face, static picture with just my mouth moving and eyes moving, talking in a girl's voice about the copy traineeship.
Wow.
It's nuts, right? And
Yeah.
it was like half an hour. So I love.
You're excited about
yeah,
the
I'm
potential.
really excited about learning new things.
So I think even in terms of how open you are to the world and exploration and all of that, I remember you telling me that you told your mom that you wanted to get your nose pierced.
Yeah.
And she said, "Why are you a homo?"
Yeah.
So I mean, in this new world of where identities are fluid and concepts are fluid and we are all grappling with how to be. You obviously represent the kind of man who is very, I mean, to put it in a very limited sense, metrosexual in that sense, na? That they called Shah Rukh Khan the first metrosexual.
I detest labels, I think,
Huh.
you know, but
Huh.
I don't think that I am any kind of man. And I don't think women are any kind of women. I just think we are who we are, you know, and what stops us from being who we are people or other people. Now, if you just for a second, and you know, when I had this conversation with my mom and I said, you know, I really want to pierce the side of my nose. Her first instinct was, "Are you gay?" And that instinct I get because that's the same instinct that other people will have. So I get that instinct. Okay. Yes, it hurt a little bit when she said it because she's my mother. She's supposed to understand who I am, and you know,
Right.
I've always been. It's not like I woke up today and became like this. I've always been like this. But to come back, I think when you take that filter out of, oh, like what are people going to think about this? If you take that out and if you could just live your life as joyously as possible, I think you'll have a great life. Like, for example, I want to pierce my nose today. The next week, I may not think it's such a good idea, in which case, I won't. So, allow yourself that flexibility and freedom to try new things. And if it doesn't work, don't do it. You don't have to be in a certain structure.
Box. Yeah.
But unknowingly, we all become, we all put ourselves in these boxes. I'll give you an example. I was talking to my wife last night, and for the copy traineeship, I have a social media like a lookbook kind of like so there are themes that run. Now, when I was creating it, it was looking very very nice because it was all in grids and you know there was a white kind of thing running down the middle. But when I looked at it yesterday, I was like, yeah, it's looking too like clean and formatted, and that is not who I am only, yeah. So I said, no, yeah, I just want to fuck around with it a little bit now. So I think in the next couple of weeks, I'm just going to fuck with everything I've done for a while and just do some other stuff.
Let something else
I think
happen.
I think you look at some things and is this fun? The minute it stops being fun, you should just stop doing it. You know?
Right.
Relationships as well. At a certain point in time, a relationship will no longer be fun. Then what's the point in being in that relationship? What does a relationship bring to the table if not fun, if not lightheartedness, if not hugs, right? What does it value add to your life? Stop being in one.
That's a very sort of different take on the old model of lifelong everything, है ना? Because in the sort of old-fashioned world that we grew up in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, I would say, that everything was fit in a box. There was a prescription,
Yeah.
and you either lived up to that prescription or you were assessed on how far away from that prescription you moved, right?
Yeah.
And your entire life seems to be a journey towards how not to come close to any prescription.
Yeah, to any box at all.
Yeah,
Box,
yeah.
run.
Run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my mechanism. As
Yeah.
soon as I see a label, I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
that I cannot. I feel like a misfit when
Yeah.
I'm in that box.
Yeah. And so what would you say is some words of advice? I would say, I mean, of course, you know, women will talk about women, but I would really, to guys, you know, because most men don't have this kind of insight and experience to be as vulnerable, and they don't have the models also. You know, you are an exceptional model of how to be for a guy growing up, because they usually have these very dominant patriarchal stereotypes that they feel pressured to follow. So what are 3 or 4 things that, you know, you would tell kids that could ease the pressure, or people, not just kids?
See, I think I don't know. I don't know if I have 3-4 things. I don't even know if I have advice. But I think most men that I've met are too involved with being men. You know, men function a certain way, and we've been seeing men function a certain way for centuries. But what really differentiates you and me are the genitals. There's nothing else.
Right.
There's nothing else,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So if you keep genitals outside of the equation, you'll program yourself to be a human being. The genitals come later, right? The genitals are great for sex, but it doesn't serve any purpose to day-to-day life. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't wave your genitals up in the air and you enter a conversation with someone. You enter a conversation with someone
Yeah.
like you and me are talking as people, as human
Right,
beings.
right,
Right?
right.
So when you keep genitals aside and you just say that, okay, I just want to explore myself. I want to find out who I am. Right? That's a
Yeah.
great way of
Exploring a new identity.
correct
And what you can be.
Yeah,
And what you can be.
an identity that is not limited to
Yeah.
your gender.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
which is why when I said I want to pierce my nose, then it becomes a conversation around gender. Whoa, but women do this. Why would men do it? Now take that out. Take that out of the equation. Like I want to wear a sari, and I will. I've asked my wife to teach me how to wear one. I will, and I want to wear one because I think it looks great, and I think I could carry it off.
And you think your daughter would be cool with you wearing
Oh,
a
she'll be
sari?
embarrassed as fuck. Yeah, but I don't care. Yeah. So whenever I go to her parent-teachers meetings or her exhibitions at school, I'm wearing something like this or whatever. And she looks at me like, oh no, shit. My father. But her friends are like, hey, your dad's here, he's looking so
So
cool.
cool, yeah.
So, but it's okay. After a while, I don't really care what she thinks. Like, as I said, she's another human being. You know?
Right,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, she's really embarrassed about some of the things. But I think also she's torn between being embarrassed and also really liking it. You know, and she's the kind of person
finding
who
it
always wear
liberated.
black.
Yeah.
She's in that black phase now. She'll wear
Ah,
black, oversized
okay.
black t-shirts and hoodies
Yeah.
and full pants and black shoes. She's in that phase. I'm like, add some color to your life, yeah?
Yeah.
Why are you just dressed in black? What's going on?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, people have their patterns, people
Yeah.
have their themes for certain parts
Yeah.
of their lives, and they grow out of it.
But it's been quite a roller coaster talking to you and sharing these whole lot of ideas that kind of stir up the pot of perception, really, because we see life in sort of these little boxes,
Yeah.
as we said,
Yeah.
and we seem to think that we have to contribute to each and every box rather than create a box of our own.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And at least this conversation seems to have been about is how to craft even what goes into the creation of that box.
Yeah, because it's
You know,
all you at the end of the day.
It's for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So thank you for being here
very
and
welcome.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for this joyride of a conversation.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
been
very
great
much.
having
Thank you
you.
for having me.